Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today by my good friend David Seifert. We call him the Director of Credibility here at D1Baseball.com. That's Mike Rooney's pet name for him, but his official title is Director of College Scouting, D1 Baseball and Prep Baseball. We're going to talk 2025 SEC prospects today, something we haven't talked about really on this podcast, and I'm doing it now because I think it's a good opportunity for fans who are kind of into the prospect piece of things to lock in, because we're about to go to Hoover and all 16 teams are going to be there. And so you're going to have a chance to look at every single player of note in the SEC while they're in Hoover. So I thought it was a good opportunity to really get a lay of the land from a prospect standpoint. So we're going to touch on a lot of stuff with Seif here in just a few minutes. But before we get into that, I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family. Available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan Brand, now at Academy. Seif, busy time of year for you, so I appreciate you carving out a little time for me this morning.
Anytime is good, and it's the busiest time of year, but also the most fun time of year too. So
100%, same here. Like, we're getting to the part of the year where, especially once we get to conference tournament week, where sleep becomes a precious commodity, which I know it probably already is for you, because Seif has real responsibilities like children, that the Joe does not have. But yeah, it gets even more scarce this time of year for sure. So we're getting, but you're right, a lot of fun. We're in this business because of times like now. So, all right, let's jump right in, Seif. The first player I wanted to ask you about was Jace LaViolette, who's perhaps the most famous player in this 2025 class from a college perspective, and for a while was the number one on your board. Has recently, I don't want to say fallen, because he's gone from 1 to 4. That's still in the mix with the top players. But how do you evaluate LaViolette's draft year? And is it just a matter of some guys that maybe outperformed him that have jumped him, or are there things about his season that have given you and perhaps other evaluators a little bit of pause?
Yeah, I think pause is a great word. I mean, the season's not done. A&M has one more week of the regular season, the conference tournament, then kind of go from there. But it's been a little bit of both. He hasn't improved in the areas that he's needed to improve upon, but there's also been guys that have just passed him, like Aloy from Arkansas, Kilen from Tennessee. I mean, guys who have just really stepped up their game and passed him, frankly. So, in particular, Level A did cut a strikeout rate, but his ISO is just like, is basically his power production fell. So I think in the real world where guys, we want to see a strikeout rate fall, but we want to see the ISO go up. Like Aloy has done that. Kilen has done that. Jared Jones was on track to do that, but Jared Jones kind of has fallen off in the SEC play. So, Ethan Petrie as well. Or Evans, as well. He was on track to do that, but just with the injury, the time preceding the injury, he's fallen off that track. But overall, yeah, it's been a little bit of both for Level A. Maybe not fulfilling what we expected him to do or what he should be doing, but also guys just stepping up and improving.
Since you mentioned Aloy, let me go there next. It's a bit of a two-part question. Do you see him as the top shortstop prospect in the SEC? And then relatedly, is Gavin Kilen a shortstop to you, or kind of what do you look at him defensively as far as that part goes? Because I know that's has been up in the air.
Well, since he's playing there now, I think that is the consideration right now. We get to see him there now. Curley's moved on to third base, and Kilen's at shortstop, even though he's been bothered with the hamstring most of the year. But to say Aloy is the SEC Player of the Year and he's a shortstop, his numbers certainly don't lie. Yeah, he is. That in my opinion, that's who he is. But for me, as the number one prospect who's playing shortstop right now in the SEC, for me, it's Kilen, just because the bat-to-ball contact skills are so important. And he also has some power. He doesn't have Aloy's power, but he has enough power where he can project 12, 15 home runs a year at the major league level, 25 doubles. He's going to be that type of player. So whether he plays second base in the future, he's a shortstop now. So to answer your question, I have Tennessee. I have Kilen at my number one shortstop prospect in the SEC. But Aloy is like if Kilen's 1A, Aloy is 1B. They're right there neck and neck.
Yeah, that's interesting. Talk about. We talk about the you and I could complain about stuff we don't like about the transfer portal and all that stuff, but Aloy being a guy who, I'm not saying he would have been a great prospect at Sacramento State, but being able to go to Arkansas and prove himself against SEC pitching has only helped his stock. And so that's one of the positives from a player standpoint for the transfer portal is, look, you have the opportunities there. And if, you're going to sink or swim. And in his case, he is not only swimming, but he's swimming in the Olympics, basically.
Yeah. And with all that said, I mean, both guys for me are going to go within the top 10 or 12 picks overall. And with that, Aloy has a better arm. He has more power. The thing I just don't like, again, is I like Kilen's bat to ball. Aloy really struggles with sliders. He chases way more. And I think, if you watch the LSU series here last weekend, Aloy struggled with the slider, was right there in front of you. I mean, he went, at least twice, he went 3 up, 3 down on 3 sliders. Just like bang, bang, bang. It was just a super 3 bad passes, 1 at bat, and just, kind of a waste of an at bat. But that's my only concern. But he's going to be a big leaguer. They're both going to be big leaguers. But if you ask me which one's going to be the better, most productive over a long major league career, I got to go with Kilen.
Yeah, that's fair. You mentioned Dean Curley, so let's actually kind of lean into that a little bit. The defensive struggles have been noticeable. They've moved him off of shortstop, as you alluded to. How much has that affected his stock in your eyes, or just based on what the industry is saying? And is his bat enough to kind of help mitigate some of that?
Man, I thought his bat was going to be enough to mitigate some of it, but he hasn't actually had, that type of year. His defensive struggles are not a concern of mine. I think at shortstop they were, right? It was like this. Okay, he started as a freshman, played on a national championship team as the freshman shortstop, right? And how was he going to improve or prove that he could stay there, not only for Tennessee, but at the pro level? And I think he's proven that he's not going to be a pro ball shortstop. So they moved him to third base, where he should be a Gold Glove third baseman, and I think he will. But I don't know the exact timing, but I did see where he made 2 errors in the 10th inning and essentially, threw away that ball game for him. And I can't even tell you what game it was. It was 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But I think that was just a blip. I just think that was the outlier. I think it's just all between his ears right now, and I think he'll get that straightened out. His arm's too good. His hands are too good. His feet are too good not to be a plus defender at third base at the next level. So defensively, I have no concerns about him staying on the dirt. The bat just hasn't progressed this year, and whether it's related to defensive struggles, I'm not real sure. But I think there's just more mental just uncertainty going on between his ears right now than his physical tools or his projection in the pro ball. But again, I think he's a big leaguer. I think he's went from maybe a top half of the first round guy to definitely second half, if not early in the first supplemental round. But that's kind of where he falls for me. But I still love the player. It just has not had that type of year that, just like LaViolette, just like that scouts were expecting him to do.
Yeah, that's well put. I didn't expect to be so Tennessee heavy early in the show, but I have one more on Tennessee. How do you go about evaluating AJ Russell, just given how little he's pitched? I mean, when he's been healthy, which has been rare, it's great, but we just seen so little of him. I'm just kind of curious more about less of what you think about him, although you can share that as well. But just like going back to your career when you were working in front offices, like as an organization, how do you even go about kind of figuring out what on earth he's going to be when you've seen so little of him?
Yeah, he's really difficult. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he had surgery, but it was just the brace. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So that's that's obviously a newer surgery than I've been used to in a front office evaluating, or not me personally evaluating medicals, but listening to doctors talk about medicals. So I don't know where the brace falls in the severity, right? Probably not as severe as a shoulder labrum, but in even less than a Tommy John, but they're not even really concerned about Tommy John. So anyway, to get to your point, for me, just his lack of pitching he's really went for me. I thought he'd be a top half of the first round guy or a slam dunk first round guy. So for me, he's went from not the number one pick of a club to a club's second pick, because I just don't think you want to put AJ Russell up there as, hey, this is our number one guy. This is our poster boy, right, for the 2025 draft. So I think he's fallen as he's got to be a club's number 2 pick, but I think that's his floor as well. Like, I don't think he's going to become a third rounder just because he hasn't pitched. His stuff is too good metrically, he has the best fastball in college baseball. At least he did entering the season. I'm not sure how they've measured up yet. I'll get all that data here another week and a half. But that's kind of where I feel about AJ Russell. I mean, the stuff is just excellent. Everything, you got to love everything about him. But, he'd be a great haul to a team's day one haul, top 3 rounds. Day one now is 3 rounds instead of 2. But he'd be a great addition to that day one haul, but just not as the number 1 haul.
Yeah, you said something interesting there, Seif, that I think I'd never really thought about, but it makes sense. Like that there's something to being a team's first pick, whether you're 1-1 or you're 129, like that you're going to be the guy that they're going to fly into the big league park and take photos with the jersey. And like that there is something to being that first pick for a club. Like, I guess I never considered that, but it does make some sense that there's more to it than just, being talented and working your way through the system. You're the poster boy.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is a little crude too, but like to break it all down, scouting directors are evaluated on a lot of things, but really the biggest one they're evaluated on not if they treat their scouts well or if they are great communicators. They're evaluated on like, hey, how did his number 1 pick do? Like, what is that number one pick in that draft? What are they doing? Are they a star? Are they a bust? What are they? And that's how they're rewarded with another contract. If they keep hitting on first rounders, really the rest of the draft, it matters, but really doesn't matter outside that number 1 guy. And just Russell's so risky. I just don't think, I don't know. That's just a huge risk for him to be your poster boy.
Makes some sense. Has any SEC pitcher helped himself more this season than Kade Anderson from LSU?
Oh, no chance. He's went from a guy, I think, early second round supplemental, around that pick 35 guy, 40 in the fall. And that was just in the fall. And I'm not drafting for any clubs, but he's very likely to go in the top 5 overall picks now. I mean, he's just pushed his way that far up. Jamie Arnold from Florida State had a huge lead as the number 1 lefty. But now Anderson's closed that gap. And for me, I would probably, hate to say it, I'd probably flip a coin. If I had the choice of both of them, I'd probably flip the coin, 3 times and see which one hit twice because it's that close.
In your eyes, what puts Arnold and Anderson ahead of, say, Liam Doyle?
Just long-term projection. I can see I'm not a delivery expert, but I know enough about the mechanics to know. I think there's more velocity in Jamie Arnold. I really do. Now in a 6'1", 190-pound frame, maybe there's not a ton more weight that's going to be gained with his frame, but I think there's more velocity. Just honestly, if you'd hold his back foot on the ground longer, if he would just ride his backside down the plane, he's got that whippy arm. So guys, he just takes advantage of that whippy quick arm. But I think there's more velo there, and his off speed is plenty good already. I mean, he has 3 pitches that he throws for strikes that are all above average, and then Anderson has 4 or 5. Like, he has 4 for sure, and he's going to learn a cutter. All lefties, all guys learn cutters these days, right? So he's going to have 5 pitch. He's going to be like Max Fried. But Anderson, just the competitiveness and he has just elite feel. Just if you watch the Oklahoma game where he threw 135 pitches, that was outstanding. And I've been waiting to watch him, not cheering against him, but just making sure he bounces back every outing after that 135 pitch outing. And I know he came out early this past weekend, but he looks to be still on track. So my only concern with Anderson, if he just got overused, but man, both are just special pitchers, and Anderson has just really jumped up just by his performance and the uptick in his stuff.
Kyson Witherspoon from Oklahoma is the top right-hander on your board. Tell me a little bit about what you've liked from him this season.
I mean, everything. He posts every week. I think he's had 1 bad outing. And again, I'm not going off stats. I'm a traditional scout. I scout the tools. But, I mean, the guy touches 98. He throws 95. He maintains his velocity. He's got a plus slider. At times it's even better. He throws it for strikes, I think, 2/3 of the time. He's got a changeup that he doesn't use very much. I think it's a split change. He doesn't use very much, but it's really good too. So, there's 3 legitimate pitches. I know he has a 4th one in his bag as well. And again, I think he was seen as a first rounder coming into the year, and he's done nothing to, dispel that. He's a top half of the first rounder now, 4 pitch for strikes, athletic, and best of all for this guy, like his makeup off the charts, competitive, hardworking, great human being. There's nothing to not like about Kyson Witherspoon.
Shout out to the JUCO guys, Northwest Florida State, Kyson.
Yeah, one and done JUCO guy right there.
Yeah. He and Malachi both. Jared Jones of LSU, are there red flags on him just given the way he's performed or not performed in SEC play? I think he's hitting something around 250. I think it's 4 or 5 home runs. I think 4 in SEC play. By comparison, Stephen Milam has 5 in SEC play, and those two human beings are very different sizes. I just think that's funny how different size they are. But, I think with Jared Jones, we knew that it was just the bat, right? I mean, he's a competent first baseman, but the bat is what's going to carry him. And so if that's not there in the same way, I just wonder how that's affected the way he's being viewed.
Yeah, I think early in the year he had a green flag, right? Like, man, it's all been fixed.
Yeah,
right? His swing and miss is now like, I think it was like 14. It was leveled at 14 for a while. And he boosted that ISO. So he was the guy. I look for guys, like I said earlier, like guys who cut their strikeout rate and boost their ISO in the same season. I mean, those are the guys you're looking for. Those guys can adjust their swings. And those guys, for me, that's as simple. I mean, there's a lot of other metrics that you can look at. You can look at, and then traditionally, you just look at the swing and the strength and bat speed and things like that. But yeah, so to answer your question, it's a huge red flag, right? Like his strikeout rate has creeped back up to what it was last year, but his ISO has dropped. So his strikeout rate is the same, if not worse than last year, but his ISO has got worse. So he's hitting for less power. So, and as hard as it is to drop the strikeout rate and raise the ISO, it's also hard to keep the strikeout rate the same and lose power. So he's went from a guy who's probably being picked around like pick 35 or 40 to guys like, man, the A's are going to take him because he's Mark McGwire 2.0 to he's probably one of those third round guys that, where you start picking the lightning in the bottle reliever, the reliever that throws 100, get him on the mound, see what we can do. And pick that big power guy like Jared Jones in the 3rd, 4th round where it's kind of like, okay, it's huge risk, but there's huge upside if it clicks.
Florida's Jake Clemente has been interesting to me because it was a guy I saw him on the Cape a decent bit because Brewster was one of my teams, and the Brewster is Harwich. Pardon me, Harwich. Nope. Brewster. It's important that we get this right, Brewster. And I really liked what I saw. And then the year as a guy who Florida was going to give a shot in the rotation, and it wasn't a disaster, but it also clearly wasn't his ultimate role for them. And now he's in the bullpen and he's absolutely dominating. So I'm kind of curious from just from how you measure that. Has that hurt or helped Jake Clemente that it didn't necessarily work as a starter, but now he's in the bullpen and he's like kind of like Brandon Neely 2.0, where it's like, okay, he's not quite a starter, but in the bullpen, he's awesome. How do you kind of weigh that for him?
Yeah, I saw him in the Cape too. I didn't know exactly what you're talking about. I was like, man, this guy might be a 2nd rounder, right, as a starter. And he's certainly not that. He proved that. But for me, if I'm the drafting club, I'm still starting to consider him if I'm drafting late 3rd round, 4th round. But when I do pick him, I'm putting him back as a starter to see what I can get. Kind of, if you go way back to the Florida club, you're probably going to have to help me out with these names. Dane was an arm. He was a starter. Draft pick by the White Sox, I think, 1st round, went in the 1st round. But they also had the guy who actually, hate to admit, but I actually like the other guy better. I think it was Anderson. He spent a lot of time up with the Giants, but he was a reliever, and the other guy was a starter. They both ended up being starters in pro ball. But I think Clemente, he's a starter for me in pro ball. Just put him in there, let him go 3, let him face 2 times through the lineup, 3 times through the lineup, let him get his 90 pitches in and see where it goes from there. So even though he didn't have success for Florida and now he's doing great in their bullpen, for me, he's still starter in profile. At least he profiles that way, which it's a much better profile to be selected in a higher round than if you profile as a dead reliever. Like, I'm not going to go through the list of like just dead on relievers. Well, I will. I'll just name one. Like Chase Shores will probably be picked higher than Jake Clemente, but Chase Shores is a bullpen. He's a power arm in the back end of the bullpen at the pro level, where Clemente probably profiles like it was maybe a 4 or 5 starter who could be a really good mid reliever. So one has more value than the other, but I'm rambling here, but it's short stories. Clemente still profiles as a starter for me, so he's still a top 4 round guy. In my mind.
The names you mentioned, Dane Dunning, I think is who you're referring to for Florida, and then Sean Anderson was the the closer. Yep. Yeah,
I knew you knew it. I knew you know the names, but I actually I like Anderson a lot, I liked him a lot. I know everybody was on Dunning that year, and I was like, hey, both these guys are really good, and they both made the big leagues, but Dunning has obviously had the better career.
Sure. I didn't give you this question in the notes I sent over, but I'm sure you'll be just fine with it. What do you make of RJ Austin as a prospect? He's a guy that it just feels like we're just waiting, and like waiting and waiting and waiting. And I have to assume that's part of your evaluation, is just that it doesn't feel like he's necessarily made the leap we expected.
Yeah, I mean, the tools are all there, right? The baseball ability, the tools are all there. And again, I'm not saying it's in his head, but watching him, I think he just puts so much pressure on himself. I think he's the type of guy that just, hate to say it, but he wants to be perfect, and nobody's perfect, and it's not a perfect world. Sounds like I talked to my daughter with her softball, right? Like she thinks she should make every play, and she should hit a home run every time she hits, right? And I think that's kind of the Austin mentality. Is like he just thinks it, like, every ball should be a hard hit. He should make every play, things like that. It just doesn't happen. It's baseball, right? So I think his is more in his head related. He's a talented athlete, but you can't talk around his numbers, right? One of the things I was taught in a draft room was like, don't try to defend the indefensible, and there's no way you can defend his numbers. So he goes from a potential, top 30, 40 overall pick in the preseason to, he may be a third, fourth rounder. He's kind of like Trey Phelps in that regard, right? He had high hopes at the beginning of the season. Now they're kind of guys that are going to go maybe third round, early fourth round, depending on how many high school guys. It's a pretty good high school draft. So we're just talking generally here when I say a round number. So don't hold me to anything, Joe.
No, it's too late. It's too late, Seif. We already hold. No, I'm kidding.
Already through.
All
right.
But I can already tell you, and this is not a criticism of the folks who cover the draft, because I think for the most part, folks in the industry do a good job. But I can already predict the way RJ Austin's going to be talked about when he's selected, and I think this is right. Like, people will say, look, if this is a guy, if you can unlock this guy, he might be the best player you take in the draft as a fourth round pick or whatever it is. And Trey Phelps kind of the same way. And also that wouldn't shock me. Someone as toolsy as he is, like, if he just, for whatever reason, the pro ball just unlocks something for him.
Yeah, I mean, they call it draftitis for a reason, right? It's not a made-up term. It's a real thing. Some guys just put more pressure on themselves, like LaViolette. I think Austin's in that same boat. It just happens. And, some guys are able to get out of it, and some guys are not. But Austin, man, I've just heard great things about him as a human being, and I think he'll get out of it. I think he's got the strength and the mental strength and everything else to do it. So he may be just that buy low guy, right? He's a junior, get him in the third round, all of a sudden you got an everyday big leaguer, because he does have that. He does have those type of tools. Yeah.
A couple of other quick ones. Tell us about Charles Davalan. I feel like he's a little bit of a, kind of flown under the radar guy. Florida Gulf Coast a couple of years now at Arkansas, and he's been as important as anybody in that lineup, maybe except for the Aloy brothers. What have you seen from him so far? What can you tell us about just his seemingly just kind of jump onto the radar?
Yeah, I saw him in the Cape. I don't know if you saw him in the Cape too. We kind of cover specific teams, yet we see all the teams kind of thing. And he stuck out to me in the Cape, but he stuck out to me like, hey, here's a smaller guy, got some tools. He can play infield, outfield. I had him in the top 5 rounds going in, last fall. I was like, potential top 5 rounder. Then I saw Arkansas play Oklahoma State in the fall, and he was just okay, right? He moved to the outfield, not really a center fielder. On a good day, he's average in left field, throws below average. But then when you put a whole season this spring together with his bat to ball, he's got average raw power. He walks way more than he strikes out. His contact rate is like 93%, which is crazy. And he hits the ball consistently hard for him. Again, his average or max exit velocity is around 110. I think it's 110 and a half or whatever. So that's average power, but he consistently gets to it, which is really good. That has a lot of value these days. So Davalan's definitely well inside of the 5th round, maybe early 3, late 2, and maybe even more to, the clubs with the right analytical algorithm. Who knows? But guys like him have really improved their value, just the bat to ball guys, especially in the last 3-4 years.
All right, last question for you. And I sent you this one yesterday because I didn't want to put you on the spot and catch you flat-footed necessarily. But, pop-up guys in the SEC don't really exist because the SEC is so, everybody knows everybody. Like, there's no secrets really. But there are guys that maybe the SEC's version of a pop-up guy, where it's like a guy who's really helped himself, or a guy who went from being a fringe prospect to maybe a real guy, or maybe a senior that got passed over that now has suddenly kind of like made himself perhaps a little bit of equity in the draft. Do any of those types of guys come to mind of an SEC version of a pop-up guy?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Like you mentioned the senior, right? Well, Cade Snell is not a sleeper. I mean, his stats are going to hit you in the face and be like, holy cow, but Cade Snell, right? But he's kind of a sleeper because last year he came in and, I coached JUCO, I coached 4-year. And so I kind of see it like JUCO guys generally, outside of Brent Iredale, who started crazy hot and has kind of cooled off. Usually JUCO guys need that 75 plate appearances, almost 100 plate appearances their first year out of JUCO into a 4-year, especially in the SEC, to kind of just get adjusted, right? I mean, they have the whole fall, but it still takes a little time in the spring just to whatever. And if you take out Snell's first 75 plate appearances of last spring and you start April 12th of last year against Arkansas, he was hitting 278. He finished at 324. Now look what he's done this year. So if you just take that year and a half essentially, or year and a third, really, his numbers are outstanding. So sleeper, not really, because if you know SEC, Cade Snell. But again, that guy's going to get taken in the top 5 rounds as a senior. Another guy's Chris Stanfield, right? He's transferred from Auburn. He's now at LSU. He doesn't have any power, but he's shown he can hit for average. He can show he can play a better than average, if not plus center field. So again, maybe kind of an afterthought after last year. I think he was sophomore eligible actually last year when undrafted, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be getting some consideration 5th, 6th round. But I think the biggest guy of all, again, a JUCO guy, but this is very unheralded JUCO guy in his first year. We've all heard about Iredale, right? But Riley Nelson at Vanderbilt. He doesn't perfectly profile to first base because the power's not there yet, but he definitely has a great swing. He uses all fields. He walks more and he strikes out. He has enough power. I haven't seen enough of him at first base, but I know they don't play him there all the time. I know he's not the guy they go to in the late innings, so I get the idea he's probably not the best defender there, but he's got some flexibility. He's got enough athleticism. Maybe he can play the outfield. But Riley Nelson at Vanderbilt would be definitely that sleeper who's going to sneak in there 5th, 6th round. So I don't know if I gave you the 3 you're thinking, but those would be my 3. Just skimming things in the SEC at this point.
Yeah, no, I think those are 3 great names. Riley Nelson's so interesting to me because I'm not sure where Vanderbilt would be without him. And then because he's been the most consistent guy from start to finish this year. And then second of all, he's not just a unheralded JUCO guy. Like, it's a guy they just brought in July. And we're like, yeah, okay, come on down.
Yeah. I think he came in with the hitting coach from Dayton, right? I think when that coach came, that coach knew about him, something. I'm not sure. I think there's a relationship there with the Dayton coach coming in, but it could be wrong. But that's just my hunch. But I know you didn't ask me this question.
Yeah.
Because you said pop-up. But I think they're like, if you can be undervalued in the SEC, I would, for me, we do our rankings, and we'd be stupid not to consider like where Major League Baseball has them or where scouts have them when we're talking to scouts. But we do our own thing, and we take pride in that. But as far as undervalued SEC prospects who we like more than maybe the industry, I don't understand why more people, or there's not more love for Colby Shelton from Florida. Anthony Ianson, and I'm not trying to call out Major League Baseball pipeline, but theirs is kind of an industry survey, right? So they're talking to scouting directors. They're talking to guys down there watching these players every day. And they have Ianson the 80th best college prospect, not overall. Overall, it's like in the 120s or 130s, but 80th best college. For me, Anthony Ianson, he's a near first rounder. I mean, I love the guy. I love the guy. Last summer with the USA CNT was outstanding. He was a top 2 rounder for us coming in the year, and he's definitely done everything to stay there. If not, he might go as high as pick 35 or 40 overall. I love Gage Wood. Gage Wood isn't even ranked in the top 150. But if you compare just his raw stuff, now this is a little stretch, but if you just metrically compare his raw stuff to Jack Leiter, it's right there tick for tick, and Gage Wood has a better breaking ball. I know Gage Wood wasn't very good in his last start, but Gage Wood throws 98 and his ball rises and he's got a hammer and he's got a changeup. So Gage Wood to me is undervalued. And then the last guy I saw early in week 1, and I put him in like as a 5th rounder, but I think he's really played his way up to maybe in the 3rd round, is Luke Hill from Ole Miss. Yeah. I just think that guy, the bat to ball, the defense is there. He's just a very well-rounded player. So, and then 3 others, Sawyer Hawks, Brian Curley, and Christian Fouch. Fouch has been down this year, but he was so dominant last year. I just think he's got to go top 3-4 rounds as well. I mean, he throws 100 and he's got a splitter that he really hasn't used yet there, and his cutter hasn't been very good either, but he's got them all in his bag, and he's just a matter of time finding them those pitches again.
Yeah,
so
it's an easy 100 for Fouch.
I'll stop now. Yeah.
No, I love it, Seif. Like, this is the reason we have you on, right? Easy 100 for Fouch, by the way. Like, it's just like, it's when they say it comes out easy, that's kind of what they're talking about. My thing on Luke Hill too, and I'll get out of here on this, is that I think you're getting a pretty tough player too, which was not necessarily his MO coming out of Arizona State. That was not necessarily what I had heard on him. But I think about early last year, right after he transfers to Ole Miss, he's in a terrible slump. He's getting booed at home, in part because there was some social media controversy that he had, like supposedly, I forget exactly what it was, and I don't want to speculate because I don't want to be wrong. But like, there was a social media controversy he was involved in. The home fans were booing him. He was in a terrible slump.
Runes could tell us. We just have to, summon his room here.
That's right. Yeah, let's see if we get him up here. But and I kind of thought, oh boy, this is a bad situation. And he just kept working at it, got hot second half of the year. And then this year from the jump, he's been great. And like, I know if I were a 19 or 20-year-old, however old he was, I guess 20, like that might have crushed me. Like, you guys are supposed to be on my side and you're booing me here. And like, I feel like I can't come out here and play in front of my home fans and perform. And now I'm caught up in this like social media thing. Like, I don't think I'd be tough enough to deal with that and fight through it. And he did. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. That's hard.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. Seif, I appreciate you joining me today. Again, David Seifert, Director of College Scouting for D1 Baseball and Prep Baseball. Thanks, friend, for joining me and looking forward to chopping it up with you as we get a little bit closer to the draft.
Thanks for having me on again. Thanks, Joe.
All right. I want to say thank you also to our sponsors, Academy Sports and Outdoors and Tecovas Boots. One more thank you to David Seifert of D1 Baseball and Prep Baseball. And thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll